calling in from sunny Mauritius. As we've been talking, we've had a pretty intense weather extremes for the last couple of days, but here we are today in our fourth webinar. Today's topic is unlocking our innate potential in a globalized world. So I'd like to say welcome to everyone and to our three lovely panel members. So whenever we start a webinar, what we usually do is I'd like to share a little bit about who Abhyas is. So Abhyas, coming to you from Mauritius, is the Institute of Universal Awareness. And our organization was founded by Namdeo in 2019. And our mission is really about spreading awareness all around the world, awareness about ourselves, about our innate potential, because it is from that place, my dear friends, that we can actually create something new for ourselves. And that's what our topic is about today. So we have lovely members in our audience today as well joining. So welcome everybody. Feel free to use the chat at any point through our webinar today. Pop in your questions, pop in your comments. And of course, please do share with us, where are you dialing in from? In the past, we've had members joining in from Australia, from the UK, from Canada. It's really good to see. So please pop it in the chat. Where are you joining in from today? All right. So today's topic, and excuse me as I try and balance myself on a different screen. Today's topic is all about exploring how to optimize our innate potential and adapt to change in this really fast-paced world that we live in today. So we are going to start off with just a nice and simple quote that I really like to share here, which is by our founder, Namdeo. All transformations have one thing in common, and that is the turnaround in the perspective on what we have been through. So with that, we're going to start with, of course, introducing our lovely panel members today. So here with us today, we have Ketki, we have Allah, and we have Seema Bell. So Ketki is a global HR professional with over a decade of experience in organization development, in change management, talent management, and digital learning. Ketki and I actually go a couple years back. We both have served in a really amazing community for women empowerment called Women in Digital Switzerland. And so I'm really happy to have Ketki with us here today. Ketki is really passionate about people development. She thrives on collaboration, bringing together ideas, whilst also valuing individuals. So it's all about the human touch. Ketki's also got a very strong background in analytical and problem-solving skills. Thanks, Ketki. Thanks for joining us today. Our next panel member today is Allah. So Allah is our leadership wellbeing trainer here at Abhyas, and her wellbeing journey has been highlighted by her role, where she conducts conscious leadership courses for organizations leaders, focusing on gaining clarity, stress management, and emotional resilience. Allah also provides one-on-one conscious practices and counseling sessions, aiding leaders to cultivate a healthier working environment. Thank you, Allah, for being with us here today. And our final speaker today is Seema, coming in from Toronto. Welcome, Seema. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. So Seema is an occupational therapy professional. She's been passionate about holistic mind, body, spirit approaches since she was 19, shaped by her own pain management journey and her work with chronic pain clients. So Seema is also a certified yoga instructor since 2013, and she's taught in workplaces and homes, online, and now she works part-time at 2 Toronto area gyms whilst working full-time as a clinical specialist. I love that, Seema, and welcome to our panel today. Thank you. All right, so from here, we're actually going to move on to some questions. We're going to start with a question for our lovely audience. So, dear audience, please pop onto your keyboards and let's answer the first question together. What does harmony look like to you in this globalized world? Let's just give it about 60 seconds. Just pop in a word or two. It doesn't have to be anything too long. Excellent. So what does harmony look like to you in this globalized world? Okay. What I might do is navigate over to the chat and just let's have a look, and I'd love to hear from some of these lovely individuals what they're putting in here. Inner peace. Absolutely. Yes, definitely, definitely. Please continue keeping those comments coming through. We're now going to transition over into our panel discussion today. We have about 30 minutes and we have 3 questions. So our first question, and just bear with me for a moment as I bring it up on the screen. Awesome. So the question is, why is uniqueness and authenticity important in this globalized world? And I'll hand over to Ketki first to contribute towards this question, please. Thanks, Ketki.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me join the very exciting topic, I have to say. I mean, I'm also learning a lot about the work that Abhyas and you are doing, Priyanka. So kudos to you in driving change and bringing this transformation in the world today. So yeah, the reason I think the topic that you've chosen for today is really something which is close to my heart, and also the work that I do with people being in HR in global organizations. Of course, it helps me to be able to get closer to my own purpose and passion. In fact. And one of the ways that I see that in terms of being able to embrace uniqueness and authenticity in a globalized world is, by first of all having clarity around what are our own core values and beliefs, fostering genuine connections, because only once we truly understand ourselves can we actually really be able to connect ourselves with others. And I think the uniqueness or the authenticity, when we can fully embrace that, then I think we also have the opportunity to celebrate the diversity in the world today, which I think is what the globalized world is all about. When we talk about globalized world, yes, we say we are a small planet. Ultimately, we have very similar needs when we look across the board, but I think it's not just the needs or our own values that are as is important. It's also how we manifest those in the world today. So I think we bring our own uniqueness to the world through the way that we manifest this and demonstrate this in our everyday life.
Absolutely. That's really well said, Ketki. And I absolutely agree with you on that point. The more we can connect with our core values, the more we find we go deeper within. And it is within ourselves that we find our innate potential. It's within where we can really find what value we can bring to the world, how we can contribute. Thanks, Ketki, for that. Our next speaker for today, so just the same question for you as well, Allah. Happy to repeat it if it's not on the screen. So the question is, why is uniqueness and authenticity important in this globalized world? Thanks, Allah. Over to you.
Thank you, Priya. And hello, Ketki and Sima. And I can also see Rubina, Yaroni, and everybody else who is joining. It's great to see you all. So authenticity to me means being our true self. But do we really know who we truly are beyond this physical body, beyond our thoughts, our emotions, the name that we have, our profession? Because these are just temporary in nature, right? So the question is, how well do we know ourselves? Do we really have answers to the question, who am I? And why do I behave the way I behave? Because what is happening is that we have identified ourselves with anything that is impermanent. And that means we're living in this illusion of these identities. But that's not who we are. That's not who we truly are, because these things change with time. And so what happens is this illusion is governing then our behavior, our lives, And we're at the mercy of these identities that we have created. And they keep us confined in these walls, basically. But this is not who we are. So if we want to do something much more significant in this world, we need to be very much receptive to change, to let go of these illusionary identities. And when something comes to disrupt these illusionary identities, we need to be receptive to that disruption as well, when something is there to challenge them, so that we can then let it go and come closer to who we truly are, when all these illusions about ourselves get shattered. And it requires a transformative process of breaking these patterns of our conditioned mindset. So that's the only way that we can ascend to a higher possibility of life, something that we would call our potential, right? Our innate potential. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Allah. Absolutely. And for those of you who haven't watched our previous webinar in this series, we do actually talk a lot about being conscious and what it means to change the perception of what disruption actually looks like. And just very much like Allah said, everything that we have, and it can be challenging, of course, at first and a bit confronting. But if we look at our lives and if we look at where we have got to, how we have got to this point, how we have grown, the answer actually lies in us taking everything that we've gone through and transforming it. So with that, thanks very much, Allah. I'll definitely move on to our next speaker, which is Seema. And for you as well, Seema, I'll just repeat the question. So that is, why is uniqueness and authenticity important in this globalized world? Over to you, Seema. Thank you. Seema, I don't think you're audible. No, we cannot hear you,
Oh, can you hear
Seema.
me now?
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
I'm
Yes,
so sorry. I'm having some technical issues
that's
here. Thank you so much for
okay.
having me.
That's
Um,
okay.
yes, so I'm sorry, Priya. Do you mind just repeating the question?
Of course, I sure
Yes.
can.
Okay,
So
thank
why
you.
uniqueness and authenticity important in this globalized world?
Yes, uniqueness and authenticity. I think that is so important. We live in a world where, when I look back to many years ago, when I was young, there was no access to internet. So when I was communicating with people abroad, it was through handwritten notes. It was through using a calling card. It is just hard to believe I still live in this same generation, or we're in a different generation. And I actually was alive back then when we didn't even have that connection. But because of that now, people don't even know what it was like to live like that. We are all aware of what is going on everywhere in the world. And I feel like when that happens, there's some kind of thing that happens where people want to become more homogeneous. So maybe some people in the East, when I look at my relatives living in India and what they do, they very much are similar to what is happening in North America. And that was very different when I was growing up. I would go there and I'd feel like I'd gone back in time a little. And I was more rooted in the traditions that existed in the culture and the identity of the people that lived in India. And now, when they come to visit me here in Canada, I feel like they're even more modern than I am. And I think that has a lot to do with globalization and technology, and how here I am connected with all of you in different parts of the world just by the click of a button, minus some technical issues. But look at how different that is. And when that happens, I feel like we can lose our authenticity. We can lose our ground roots of where we come from. And so when that happens, I feel like there's no uniqueness in who we are as people. And I feel like it's so important to honor that uniqueness and authenticity. So you look at a place like Toronto, where you go to Little India, Little China, there's little neighborhoods, and you see the traditions, you see the foods, you see the Buddhist temples, you see the Hindu temples, you see different areas that reflect the culture and backgrounds of where these people came from, and you embrace and celebrate the culture. And then sometimes I'll go back to India and nobody's as deep rooted as they were before. So it's just very interesting that you see that. And I feel like there's so much to bring to an organization or to whatever it is that you're doing when you share all those values and those cultural unique parts that to whatever it is that you're sharing. So I look at the workplace. Diversity and inclusion is so important. And I believe that is because we're trying to embrace and celebrate the uniqueness. If we didn't, we would all be the same. And I think there's so much to learn from those other cultures and practices. So, for example, people are practicing yoga more than ever before. Why is that? Is it because as we all become so similar in how we are, and we're living in a competitive world, and we're all just focused on work, that we forget about our deep roots and our connection to ourselves? So I feel like there's a rise in spirituality, and we have to seek and learn from the uniqueness of what others have to bring.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, Seema. You know, being Indian myself, I was born in India but brought up in Australia. I can completely relate I mean, I joke about it. One of my very esteemed yoga teachers, she's from the US, and I feel she's more Indian than me because she goes
Yes.
back to India 3-4 times a year. You know, I was very fortunate in Australia. The time when we moved there, it was a very homogenous community, a very homogenous society. But my parents really put in that extra effort to really keep me rooted, to keep me grounded and connected to my real core values. And just echoing again what Ala and Ketki were also talking about, connection with our core values is definitely very important. The other thing that's very important is realizing that everything that is around us that we feel forms a part of our identity is impermanent. And our real potential actually lies on the other side. And for that, we do really need to have that awareness. And absolutely, as you mentioned, Seema, if we look at the time before COVID to now, we have a huge influx of yoga studios all around the world. We have more and more people talking about awareness, but do people really understand what awareness is about? Do people really know how to navigate awareness? So here at Abhyas, our Institute of Universal Awareness, this is what we're trying to discuss. This is why we have these amazing webinars, these discussions, to really build and broaden that perception of what is awareness? What does it mean to come back home to ourselves? What does it mean to connect with our true core value, and unleash our innate potential? What does that mean? So with that, I like to pause on a question, get the audience thinking a little. I'll move on to the next question. And so our next question is, how can we adapt to change and find harmony within ourselves in a constantly evolving world? Ketki, over to you, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you are audible, Ketki. Thank you.
Great. I love this question actually, because I think in today's world, adapting to change is the only constant. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but I think we've all experienced it ourselves, right? Every day is a new day. And in fact, just before we started this webinar, Seema and I were discussing how, you know, there's always something that is going on in today's world. And I think it's just a reflection of many things, right? So I think it's an important point to talk about the technological advancements in the world today. I feel that that, of course, is impacting not only us as individuals, but also the work that we do and how we deliver that work, for example. So, you know, we just talked about how easy it is now for us in a global world today to be able to connect with each other real time and exchange messages and sort of feel like we can really see what the other person is doing and where they are and those kinds of things. But I think what is not to be underestimated anymore is the fact that adaptability in that change is the unique human ability that we need to be able to leverage. And I'm not just saying that because it's part of the question, but I do think that when you look at also research outside of from World Economic Forum and other research bodies, you will see that adaptability becomes one of those leading skill sets that differentiate us as human beings. Now, it sounds like we are entering more of this cyborg kind of world where there will be, sort of machine versus human beings. I mean, at least that's the picture that is being developed in some parts. I'm sure that there are other options also that we haven't yet started talking about, but it seems to be sort of the future that we are seeing. And it's coming to us actually faster than we can actually adjust to or absorb fully. So I think what becomes even more important in those situations is the ability to be able to adapt, to realize what is our unique human value that we bring. I mean, and in my view, as I talked about adaptability as a critical one, but it's also the ability to imagine. I think so far, at least, the machines are not helping us with our imagination. They can probably brainstorm with us, but it is us who has to imagine what is the world that we want to develop and create, which I think is also a sign of adaptability, really. So yeah, I think it's a very prime moment in time for us to be able to start recognizing what makes us human.
Beautifully said, Ketki. Beautifully said. I'm not going to continue on that one because I think it's amazing to just kind of let that question hang there for our audience, just to spend some time reflecting and introspecting here. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and move on to Allah, which is the question again for you, Allah. How can we adapt to change and find harmony within ourselves in a constantly evolving world? Thanks, Allah.
Thank you, Priya, and thank you, Ketki and Seema, for your beautiful insights. So to adapt to change and find harmony within ourselves, we need to be able to expand our perception and let go of rigidity. How conscious we are depends on how expanded we are, how expanded our perception is. How inclusive can we be in our perception? If we're not expanded in our perception, then we will be rigid. We wouldn't be able to grow out of our own comfort zone, the cocoon of our comfort zone, to do something much more significant in this world. And if we remain restrictive to our understanding of life only, then the future will be the replica of the past. And so therefore there will be no change and not any improvement. There are people in this world who are completely unaffected by what they do peripherally. And those people who could adapt to change are the ones who are not overpowered by their own desires. Their desires just take a backseat because they see the meaning of life. They do not allow others to influence their way of being. They let go of all the external validation. But are we prepared to do that? That is the question. So to do that, we need to look around ourselves and see what are the restrictions, the impediments of our own progress, and how can we adopt a new life, adopt a new thought process. So the only agent of change here is the presence of our own self, without being affected by any past events and people who surround us, because that's when we can actually have the vision of life. Thank you.
Yes, beautifully said, Allah. Thank you for that. And I think it just gets me really thinking, before I came to Mauritius, I have actually traveled a lot in my life, and I do recommend it to people. Traveling, seeing different parts of the world only expands your perception, only encourages you to be more adaptive, only encourages you to break down rigidities, break down old beliefs that you had, and create space for change. And that's the key. And as we had Ketki mentioning, I really liked that she was saying about the vision that we have for the future of what do we think humanity should be like. We know that the world we live in today is increasingly becoming more technologically driven. I'm not going to give away hints for the next webinar though, because we do have a webinar coming up exactly talking about this topic. But that is all I'd want to say at this point. So thanks again, Allah and Getki. Same question for you, Seema. More than happy to repeat it for you too, which is, how can we adapt to change and find harmony within ourselves in a constantly evolving world? Thanks, Seema. Over to you.
Okay, that was my favorite question so far. Okay, so when I think of adapting to change and finding harmony in a constantly evolving world, I first look at where my background is as an occupational therapist. It's all about balancing. When I practice in my work, it's all about balancing productivity, leisure, and self-care. And if we can't connect in those three areas, there's going to be an imbalance. And so if we think of ourselves as a whole and what's happening in society, there is maybe some imbalance. Maybe it's too high in productivity and low in self-care. I think that's a common theme. And maybe there's not as much leisure happening, because you know what? It is a go, go, go world where at least I am. And I think what's happening is there is that awareness. It's happening. People are starting to pay attention more to self-care and leisure in their lives, as challenging as it is in the kind of environment that we're in. However, I think what the challenge is where do you start and how do you identify where you are in that process when things are changing? So I think I was just explaining this to Priya before about a car. Think of the world. We're all sitting in a car. Some of us are in the trunk. Some of us are in the back seat. Some of us are in the front seat. Some of us are in the engine. If we're in the engine, we're already there. We're adapting to change. We're moving with it. Things are going well. But I wouldn't say we're all there. I would say some of us are sitting in the back seat. We're not open to the change. And maybe some of us are in the trunk and we don't even want to go there. The thing is, as Ketki was saying, change is inevitable. This is the new world that we live in, and we're not going to be able to avoid it. So the important thing in this case is, if you are sitting in the trunk in the back seat where you're not willing to explore or even question the change, is to go back to your awareness of where you are and ask yourself, where am I to begin with? And then when you identify that, you maybe need to ask your why. Why am I sitting there? Why am I in that back seat? Why am I not open to that change? And when you start to ask those questions, you may come up with some answers. But also too, when you're working with others, I think it's very important, because we all work in teams of people. I think of my yoga practice and all the people that come to my classes. I always need to be aware of where they are in that car, or where they are in the change process. Some of them have been with me for years, and they're ready to move forward with new postures, new practice, whereas others are actually intimidated and scared and not willing to put in the work, and they may not come back again. So for me, it's very important for me to understand where they are in the process. And I will ask them, have you been to a class before? What have you done before? And make sure that I am adapting my class to suit their needs, but also identify where they're at and ask them why. And ask them why they wouldn't come back again, to be able to move forward and be able to meet, other people in the front seat. And you can apply that in the workplace as well. But I think it's so important when we're working with others is that we're always asking people where they are in the process. And without that awareness, it's very difficult to make the change or to help others make the change. And I think that's where a lot of conflict exists, is when people are sitting in the back seat and we're not able to get them to move with the change. So that's where I'm at with that question, is just also that self-awareness, and then adapting your way with others, but also trying to help them move forward by asking the right questions and identifying their why, and then using that to help them move forward. I know it's not always easy, but it's at least a start.
Yes, Seema, thank you for that. And yes, I do remember us having this conversation about the car, and the different parts of the car and how we can very much see and envision people that we are with and that we work with or live with or whoever it is we interact with, and the role they play. And absolutely, you're right, Seema. It does start with that self-awareness, because whatever we are seeing happening within ourselves, if we are not feeling that harmony within ourselves, if we're not willing to adapt to the change, that's exactly what's going to be reflected outside. So I absolutely love that you said that. And echoing, being a yoga therapist myself, echoing very much the fact that it is when we're delivering classes, when we're teaching people, when we're doing sessions, it's about meeting people where they're at, but it's also about acknowledging where you are at. And I think that's beautifully said. And I guess the other thing I just would want to say is we can always ask ourselves this question: what is it in me that this situation is trying to show me? That is in itself an opportunity to look within and to really see, am I adapting to this change? Is this taking me forward, or is this now becoming an impediment for my transformation? So thanks for that, Seema. Love that. Love the car analogy. All right, so we'll head over to the next question today. So our last question is, how can respect, inclusivity, and harmony foster sustainable practices? So handing over to Ketki first today, please. Thanks, Ketki.
You know, when I see that question, I'm reminded of actually two brands somehow. The first one is IKEA, and the other one is Patagonia. And the reason why those two brands come to mind is somehow because of the way that they have been able to integrate or exemplify integrating ecological responsibility and cultural diversity into their core values. I think the aspect about sustainability today, it still seems sometimes like a poster that we end up putting on the walls, especially in large organizations, because it's part of these goals, sustainability goals, which sometimes can be, of course, a pity. But I think it's pretty clear about the real business case, or really what is the reason or rationale for us to have that center stage within every organization, within every association. I think the piece that we sometimes underestimate is the impact that we sometimes, what I see is we separate ourselves as individuals and human beings from the environment that we live in. And what that means is it feels like we are giving or taking from the environment, so it's not impacting me. And I think we forget this basic principle that we are an organism that is closely linked to the environment that we live in. And when we take from the environment that we live in, we are creating an imbalance because we are not giving back equally, or in a different way at least. So, this imbalance has created a lot of environmental impacts, as we all know, including climate change. And I think the work that we need to do, and I loved what you said, Priyanka, in the beginning around the transformation that we need to go through is through the change in perspective that we bring, is this one. For me, it's really about when we separate ourselves as individuals and organisms from the environment that we live in, that's where we create the imbalance. And that's where the sustainability aspect sort of breaks down for me. And I think if we can change that perspective, that this is one whole being, then I think there is hope for where we are heading towards, at least.
Beautifully said, Ketki. Thank you for that. Absolutely, absolutely. So with that, I'll hand over to Allah, and same question for you, Allah, which is, how can respect, inclusivity, and harmony foster sustainable practices? Thanks, Allah.
Thank you, Priya. So all of the change that we want to see happening in the world actually starts with our own selves. So I will talk more from that perspective. So we need to look from a different perspective to find significance in people. There could be something much more significant in people when we turn ourselves around and look from that different perspective. And when we have resistance to change, it creates this illusion of superiority and judgment. To be inclusive, we need to let go of all the judgment. And the only way we can be propelled towards the direction that is most ideal for us is allowing ourselves to become more expanded from the very contracted understanding of life, that limited perspective that we might be holding right now. And this requires the inclusiveness of our understanding. Because the moment we're exclusive to just one idea, one set of people, the understanding that has been created through all these different happenings of life, then certainly we will always repeat what we have been. There will be no change. There will be no resistance, and we need to be able to face that resistance to ourselves, to go beyond our own understanding, beyond means it's moving away from our visual and virtual reality, the external one, towards inclusiveness. So not only what we perceive through the senses, but it's beyond that. So we need to stretch ourselves beyond that understanding. And that inclusiveness arises in absence of all our identification. Exclusivity gives us identification. And inclusiveness does not give us any identification. We're in that flow. We become that flow. So it is, what can we do on a daily basis to become that flow? So it is important for all of us to adopt new changes every single day, asking ourselves, am I better than the past? Am I better than yesterday? And just having that kind of introspection to see how we can change, where we're holding on to, where we're rigid, where we are identifying ourselves with something we're not. And this power lies in strengthening our core consciousness that says that I'm better than all the happenings of life, no matter what it is, whether it is great or whether it is miserable. Thank you.
Beautifully said, Ala. Thank you for that. I'd like to hand over to Seema, please. So same question for you, Seema. How can respect, inclusivity, and harmony foster sustainable practices? Thanks, Seema.
Thanks, Priya. I like what Ala was saying about the rigidity. And like when we have rigidity, it's very difficult to respect and be inclusive and find harmony. And I think, again, where that begins is when you look at respect. It's respect for others and where they've come from and what they have to bring to the table. So again, you look back at the roots of where people are from. I look at the Indigenous population in Canada. They are connected to their roots. They are connected to the land. There is a reason why they celebrate the sun and they celebrate, their connection with their environment. And I think that respect is so important when we're just looking at all of us and where we're all from and what we can bring to the table. But through that respect, you identify also how important it is that we do have sometimes one way of thinking or one way of looking at things because of where we've come from or what we've been exposed to all our life. And so that inclusivity is so important to be able to celebrate all of us and what we can all bring to the table and what we can all share and learn from each other. You look at entrepreneurs, they've always started with something different, a different idea, and to take on that new idea and to dig deep into it requires a risk. And it's so easy to just move with the status quo and just try and be similar to what others are doing or to replicate what someone else has done. But it's the entrepreneurs that have gone ahead and taken that chance to be unique. And when you look at their success or why they're successful, it's probably because there's something that was needed in this world that maybe somebody didn't think of. And so that's where harmony comes in, is where if you've got the respect and you've got the inclusivity and you've been unique in your approach, but you've also been able to embrace it and share it with others and respect and learn from others, that harmony takes place. And again, I go back to what we've all mentioned is the environment. We're all removed from the environment. I look at Toronto, I live in a concrete jungle. That's why people like to go up north and spend time in the woods, away from technology, away from, walking out the door and getting in your car, but being able to move around in the fresh air and breathe fresh air. I know you've got that in Switzerland, Ketki, and Mauritius, you've got sunshine all year round. We don't have that in Toronto. We have a very dark winter. Many people stay indoors. Not everyone is embracing the winter that we have, and it's really difficult because we're not as connected to the environment as we should be. And when that happens, we lose respect for the environment and we take what we can from the environment without giving back. And so I just think that that's so important when we're looking at sustainability. I worry about the future of our children. How are they going to live in a world where garbage is dumped even more than ever before? And we're just not really taking the time to take care of this place that's been brought to us with so many basic things. So fresh air, being able to put your feet on the ground and feel the earth, that's not happening all the time. So I think when you have that respect and inclusivity and the harmony, you then foster the sustainable practice. But it involves being aware of where you are in the process. And so I think that's why there is so much importance right now placed on climate change. You see it everywhere. But also digging deeper, where am I in this and how can I contribute?
Thank you, Seema. Beautifully said. So I'm conscious of time and I'd really love to give the audience an opportunity to ask any questions. So if you're comfortable to do so, you can switch on your video and we can unmute you as well. So please raise your hand or please feel free to use the chat, but this is a beautiful opportunity for you all to ask our lovely panel members any questions that you might have. Thank you, everyone. And we're just looking at the screen, yep. Rabina, I believe you've been unmuted. Would you like to also ask any questions or contribute to our discussions today?
I didn't realize I had unmuted myself, so I guess I put myself in the spotlight. Well, since I have a voice, I'm always happy to yap away. Thank you for this panel of absolutely wonderful speakers. Everything everyone said totally resonated with me as a practicing transformational coach myself. There are two things that I'm not going to go over everything. As an NLP qualified coach myself, self-awareness is really that starting point. And I think this is what underpins everything. You cannot change what you're not aware of. And if nothing changes inside of you, well, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Therefore, that's I think the first step to self-mastery and being able to identify that authenticity and that uniqueness in a non-ego-centered manner, unhealthy ego-centered manner, because sometimes that word uniqueness, it can overlap into something that can be, okay, I am unique at this. I think there is a very important spiritual flair that should be brought to that uniqueness being that something that you are able to contribute in an impactful and meaningful manner, not something of your flagship. But there are two things that juggle my mind. And I think one of the questions I have is, probably towards Seema. As a yoga practitioner, Seema, I just wanted to have your observation in terms of what you have seen happening in Toronto. Here in Mauritius, there is a trend that I noticed for a number of years now. Power yoga, gym yoga, this yoga, and that yoga. I have absolutely no intention of being disrespectful to anyone here. But from my very limited awareness and knowledge, and Allah, I am not being a closed perception here. In fact, I want to be open perception. Yog to me means union. The union that comes from yourself with that which is higher than ourself. Where does power yoga and gym yoga fit in all that? I can't get it. I would like someone to explain.
It's a great question. Great question, Rubina. I understand your question because it's funny. When I started yoga way back in the day, I remember somebody saying to me, "This is urbanized yoga. I can't do this." And yes, it exists. And I think what it is we live in a world with very busy people. It is a type A world, I would say, for the most part. And I think when you're looking at a place like Toronto where people are go, 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 that type of yoga is going to appeal to them. And it's a start. It's a start for them. It's a start for them to enter the process of uniting with themselves and finding that awareness and that connection with themselves. Because if you look at everything else that they do in their lives or that we do, it is quite disconnected. And I feel like that type of yoga may speak to people to start. And yes, maybe it might be just the be all for some of them, but it does introduce them to the next level. And that you see people then going to India, going deep into the practice of it and to the teachings and to the theory behind yoga and what it's all about. But I see it as it's the beginning of a change that's probably going to happen, or a transformation. It's trending now because people are lost and people are seeking that connection with themselves, which is very difficult to get in the world that we live in. Most people that are coming into that type of practice, they're used to, they do take care of their bodies, but it's very physical. I hope that makes sense.
Totally. Thank you,
Yes.
thank you, Seema, for that perspective. That's really sort of opened my mind, and I think that connects with what you said, is to meet people at the space they're in, like where are they sitting in the car, and then take them from there. Thank you. If I can just throw one more question, I don't know if
Yes.
I have an answer, but it's just another something that's been going on in my mind. We very much hear about inclusivity, diversity, and now we hear about equitable. So it's more like the DEI today. I ask myself the question, based on a conversation I had with a very good friend, is the notion of diversity not divisive in itself? I can relate to inclusivity. I speak about diversity. I speak about the wealth of diversity. And then one day I stopped because someone said something to me, and he said, diversity, we should be focused on collectivity, on oneness. Why are we focusing on emphasizing diversity? Basically, are we emphasizing fragments of one human whole, one human race? I don't have an answer. I am a seeker as well. And that's come from a very good friend who's advancing spiritually as well, while holding a very high corporate position. And we share. And that was the thought that he's left me with. Does anybody have any view about this? I just struggle because I think diversity, I'm saying, okay, you should be inclusive of Black women, of Asian women, of Latin women, of disabled women, blah, blah. I'm categorizing women. Why do I have to identify these diverse categories? Is that inclusive? I just beg the question. I have no idea. Where is one?
Yeah, no, Rubina, I love your question, actually. I think the reason why we're quiet is it's a very reflective one, right? So interestingly, I've been asked this question, and given the fact that I'm an HR professional, of course, this comes up very often. And also what we've seen in the US now, for example, with the new policies, a lot of companies going back on their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Right, I think this begs the question that are we actually promoting more differentiation than inclusion by calling out our differences? But I mean, I think it's a question back to us, actually. To what extent do you feel included? And of course, when you change context, so if maybe you are in your home country, in your home situation, so you feel very included because, that's the environment that you're used to and grown up in. But like, for example, I don't live in my home country and environment. And when I'm in a different context, I do feel a certain level of exclusion depending on the situation. And by no means is that something which bothers me, let's say, but I'm sure that there are people to whom and sometimes what happens is that we become, or we are subjected to decisions where we've not had a role to play ourselves, but are subjected to the decisions that someone else is making for us. And of course, there are many factors that are driving that specific decision. One of them being whatever color of skin that we might have or origin that we might have, and those kinds of things. And so it's very hard to say what is playing on someone's mind, because this is also very much in the subconscious. And most people, when they share with you why they made a certain decision, probably will never be able to identify, what is also behind some of those decisions. But I think we are all very used to that unconscious bias. So when, for example, if I say, a doctor, I met a doctor in the market, I think the first image that comes to our mind is of a male doctor. Right? What are the chances that you are first thinking of a female doctor? So, and I think it's those kinds of things that are so much taken for granted in the world that we have grown up in and that we see around us, that I think till the time that we've not reached the point where we feel enough representation of our society in positions of power, let's say, I think that these need to be called out. But that's just my personal opinion. And maybe I'm completely wrong, but that's what I feel. And whether we like it or not, yes, we are creating differentiation. But I mean, there is differentiation. And how come only a small segment of society is in those positions of power then? So that's my view.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rubina, for those questions. And thank you to all of our panel members once more. I'm very conscious of the time, so I'd like to take this opportunity to conclude our webinar for today. So I just want to mention, if you haven't joined us on LinkedIn, please do so. Abhyas Institute of Universal Awareness in Mauritius. We post all of our events and activities that we have happening here in our center. I'm very excited and thrilled to share with you two of the main things that we have happening right now in our center. As of today, we have just started our corporate teacher training program. Myself, and I'm a corporate graduate. I worked in the corporate sector for about a decade before coming here to Abhyas. And within the first week of doing my training, I made the decision to resign from my job. And that was because I was working in policy. And I was just finding that I wasn't seeing the kinds of changes we need to see in this world. We've talked about a range of different aspects of topics today about how to make everything that we're doing in our world sustainable. We've talked about from environment to Indigenous cultures and heritage. We've talked about core values. And it's one of the things to really keep in mind. Wherever it is that you work, are you being real? Are you being really connected? And for me, I guess that's what the training did for me. So for those who are interested, please do get in touch with us. It's a phenomenal training program. It's changed my life, that's for sure. And then I just want to also mention that Abhyas is very proudly going to be hosting our very first retreats here as well. They are about to start this month, and they'll be continuing on through the rest of the year. So if you're interested in being nestled in the mountains, walking barefoot on beautiful grass, walking towards the ocean and just feeling the breeze in your air, interested in getting more and more in touch with yourself, building that awareness with yourself, and also imbibing some of these amazing practices we teach here at Abhyas, then I do recommend that you sign up for these retreats, because I'm pretty confident that as soon as they start, positions will fill up pretty quickly. We keep these retreats small in terms of the number of participants, so we can really tailor the retreat in the best possible way to all of our lovely participants who come along. So with that, I just want to end on a final note, which is to say, as our founder Namdeo says, true transformation occurs when we can move above all that we have been through by changing our perspective. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wish you all a lovely morning, evening, wherever you are dialing in from. And I look forward to seeing you next week for our next topic, which is Conscious 2025. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.